Hello and welcome. Today I would like to talk about something quite simple and yet so important for IBM PC compatible retro computers, the BIOS. It stands for Basic Input-Output System, and it is a hardware-specific firmware installed on every PC. It is stored on a read-only chip, sometimes two, and is responsible for low-level PC initialization. Early PC mainboards were mostly made of standard off-the-shelf ICs. A lot of components were hardwired, while others had to be initialized. In the beginning, IBM PC-compatible mainboards were all more or less similar. Many were actually just sneaky clones of IBM models and were also compatible with the original BIOS. Later mainboard models were optimized for speed and production costs, so more and more components were grouped into chipsets and other sophisticated ICs. Of course, every manufacturer started inventing their own solutions. Despite compatibility with original IBM PC and among each other, every mainboard was still different. There were different components to initialize in different ways and orders, so custom BIOS firmware was needed. The newer the mainboard, the lower the chance that a BIOS from one board would fit another. However, all mainboards share the same starting point, which is defined by the CPU. Different CPUs have a different so-called reset vector. That is basically the address from which a CPU starts reading and executing instructions. But all CPUs use a similar approach. But today I'm talking exclusively about Intel x86 compatible CPUs. Starting from the 8086 up to modern x86 compatible CPUs, initial execution begins at the end of the address space. Well, for almost all of them. The Intel 8086 and 8088 could address 20 bits of RAM, which means a maximum of 1 megabyte. So the start address for those CPUs was 1 megabyte minus 16 bytes. The 8286 and 386SX could address 24 bits of memory, so 16 megabytes minus 16 bytes was their start address. The 386DX was a full 32-bit compatible CPU that could address up to 4 gigabytes of RAM, where the start address was at 4 gigabytes minus 16 bytes accordingly. Now, this is where I lied a little bit. Not all CPUs have their start address at the very end of their total address space. Modern 64-bit CPUs can address much more than 4 gigabytes. Depending on the model, the theoretical limit is hundreds or terabytes or even petabytes. However, for all CPUs from the 386DX onwards, the starting address remained at 4 gigabytes minus 16 bytes. Even for the 64-bit ones. So how does that work? For compatibility with the very first x86 IBM PC, which could address up to 1 megabyte of RAM, all later systems must initialize in so-called real mode. That means the system BIOS should also be accessible in the address space below 1 megabyte. But as I said, the first address an x86 CPU reads and executes from is at the end of the memory address space, far beyond the 1 megabyte limit. To work around that, mainboard manufacturers map the BIOS ROM twice, once at the end of the memory space and once right under the 1 megabyte limit, where it would be accessible for the real mode. The BIOS ROM is then written in such a way that the first instruction is aligned so that it is located at exactly 1 megabyte minus 16 bytes. This instruction is usually a jump to the beginning of the ROM, where the actual firmware is located. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I decided to make this video not only to explain these concepts, but also because I wanted to create something that could help me analyze mainboards a bit faster. You know, when I get mainboards like this one donated or I buy them from scrap hunters, quite often the pluggable chips are partially or completely removed. Usually the BIOS ROM is one of those chips, so mainboards that land on my table often miss it. If I want to check basic functionality, I have to search for a BIOS dump, burn it to a chip and see if the board shows any signs of life, just to see if it can initialize the CPU and talk to the address and data buses. Checking 5, 6, 7 or more boards in a row this way can get quite annoying, so I thought it would be nice to have a minimal BIOS that pushes some bits through the buses so I can observe any activity. The best way to analyze bus activity is a post analyzer card. This card listens to specific I/O addresses like port 80, reads data from the data bus and displays the code on a small screen. Simple as that. First of all, let's write a small assembly program for DOS that counts up indefinitely and writes the counter values to port 80 so the post analyzer can display it. We need a counter, so let's use the 8-bit AL register for that. XORing a register with itself is a fast way to reset it to 0. Then we write that counter value to port 80 and increment the counter. Next we want to run a loop that writes the next value to port 80, increments the counter and repeats indefinitely. To do that, let's create a label for the program to jump to. Let's call it loop. Here we just jump back to that label. The program writes AL to port 80, increments AL, jumps back, writes to port 80 again, and so on. The problem is that this happens so fast that we won't be able to see any numbers on the post analyzer card. So we need to introduce a delay. I want to keep this program as simple as possible without involving any timer hardware, so I will make a simple busy loop. In x86 there is a special counter register called CX, which is automatically decrements by the loop instruction. Let's use that. CX is a 16-bit register, so the largest number it can hold is hex FFFF, or 65,535 in decimal. That will be the length of our delay loop. So we need another label. Let me call it delay. Here we just loop to that label. The CX counter will automatically decrement on every loop instruction until it reaches 0, at which point it stops looping and continues to the next instruction. I see now that the name for that label was a bit unfortunate, but I hope you get the point. On a slow machine like a 16 MHz 386SX or 286, this delay should be sufficient to see the numbers counting on the post analyzer, but we can make it even slower by adding a no operation instruction, which just burns an additional CPU cycle. We could add 2 or 3 of those, but 1 should be sufficient for now. And that is almost it. To make this program work on DOS though, we need to add a few directives for the assembler. First, that this is a 16-bit program. Second, the origin point. This will be a COM program which DOS loads at an offset of 256 bytes or 100 in hex. The assembler needs to know this so it can align memory addresses and jumps accordingly. And that is basically it. The program cannot be stopped and it doesn't use the real-time clock or any other subsystems. It is as simple as I could make it. Let's compile it with NASM and see if it works. Well, at least it compiles and the binary is only 14 bytes long. I copied the program to the compact flashcards. Let me test it. And it works fine. The numbers are running on the post analyzer cards. Great. Now let me modify it so it can run directly from a BIOS ROM. Let's make a copy of the source code and call it BIOS ASM. The BIOS will not run under DOS, so there is no 256 bytes offset. This can be set to 0. Otherwise, the code itself remains untouched. All we need to adjust is the entry point. As I explained earlier, the CPU reset vector is located 16 bytes below the end of the memory space. The BIOS ROM resides in that memory region. I'm going to use a Winbond W27C512 EEPROM, which is 64 kilobytes in size. and 10000 in hexadecimal. So the reset vector address is at 64 kilobytes minus 16 bytes, which is FFF0 in hex. Our program logic starts at address 0 of the EEPROM, but execution begins at the end minus 16 bytes. Therefore, we must place a jump at the reset vector that redirects execution to address 0 of the EEPROM. To achieve this, we pad the binary up to the address FFF0 in hex. We could pad manually by adding a lot of data, but for that there is an assembler directive named times, where $- $$ gives the current size of the binary, and this pads the file from the end of our code up to FFF0 with FF bytes. Next, we place a jump instruction at FFF0 that forces the CPU to jump back to the beginning of the ROM where our code resides. At this point, the program size is 64 kilobytes minus 16 bytes plus 3 bytes near jump instruction. This would probably work as is, but for completeness, let's pad the BIOS image to a full 64 kilobytes. We can use the times directive again to pad up to 10000, which is 64 kilobytes. That's it. We now have the simplest BIOS ever. As you can see, the core logic didn't change at all. It is the exact same program I ran earlier in DOS. Now, with a bit of luck, this should run directly from the EEPROM. Let's compile it the same way we did for the COM program. Here we can see the file sizes. proc.com is only 14 bytes, whereas BIOS image is 64 kilobytes. Let's run a hex dump on both binaries side by side and compare. As you can see, the first 14 bytes are identical in both binaries. This is our actual program that outputs numbers to the post analyzer card. From that point on, we see FFs all the way down to the address FFF0. The asterisk indicates that the subsequent lines are identical until the next change. So everything between address 10 hexadecimal and FFF0 is filled with FF. At FFF0 we see 3 bytes representing a near jump to the beginning, followed by FF bytes up to the end at FFFF. Let's flash it onto the EEPROM and give it a try. And would you look at that? It's working as expected. With this BIOS, I can now quickly test mainboards to see if the CPU initializes and if the address and data buses are actually functioning, well, at least to a basic extent. For thorough testing, I would need something more sophisticated. This is the absolute bare minimum. It does not initialize any subsystems, doesn't handle a real-time clock, doesn't output video or anything else. Normally, a BIOS is responsible for initializing all those components. For example, it scans memory between 768K and 1 megabytes for the magic sequence 55AA in hexadecimal, which marks the start of an expansion or option BIOS. Such as VGA, IDE, or SCSI controller. That magic sequence is followed by the option BIOS size, and the firmware itself, and the checksum byte. And validating the checksum and executing optional BIOSes is another task of the system BIOS. I don't want to go too deep into that in this video, as I think the basic idea is clear. However, by taking a few shortcuts, I extended our simple post-analyzer BIOS with code that initializes a graphics card and prints a string on the screen. That way, we do not just see numbers counting on the post-analyzer, but we also get a video signal. At the end here, you can see the very exact same code used in the previous version. However, the beginning has changed quite a bit. I added the absolute minimum code required for video card initialization, along with a function that prints hello necroware on the screen. For this example, I used an OTI VGA card, taking a few shortcuts to showcase this concept. Most likely this code will not work on every VGA card. As I mentioned, that rabbit hole is too deep for a single video, but I hope you get the point. And here's what it looks like. It is very simple, but it opens up more possibilities for creating useful system diagnostics tools. From there, it is just a matter of adding more code to initialize subsystems like the chipsets and real-time clock, test initialized RAM, and eventually read from storage drives to locate a boot sector. Once found, it hands control over to the operating system, beginning the boot sequence we are all familiar with. And that was a brief overview of what happens during the first few seconds of a PC's initialization. With modern UEFI, some things have changed compared to legacy BIOS. Under UEFI, the CPU quickly switches into protected mode and drops legacy compatibility with the 1980s PCs. This makes it much simpler to address memory linearly rather than being restricted to the first megabyte as in real mode. UEFI itself is a fascinating but entirely different topic, probably too modern for the usual focus of this channel and too broad for today's video anyway. However, the initial CPU reset vector works the exact same way. Execution starts at 4 GB minus 16 bytes, just like on a good old 386 BIOS. And I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.